Welcome to our podcast, Evolve or Remain. Just want to start it off with a disclaimer. We are not licensed mental health counselors. This podcast is intended to help you on your healing journey. I am Melissa McLaughlin. I own Restorative Muscular Therapy and Wellness, where I do intuitive bodywork, wellness coaching, and personal training.
And I am Michael LoColle. I own or co-own Danvers Wellness Center by Soul Warrior in Danvers, and where we tackle everything from physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual work through all of those realms, which we'll get into at some point.
And together with Stephanie Parker, we created the Northshore Wellnesspreneurs, which is a networking group with health and wellness businesses in the North Shore of Massachusetts to collaborate and grow together to elicit change within the community. And we have a community outreach program as well that we will get into in subsequent podcasts.
Yep.
But we want to get into this podcast and what the purpose of the Northshore Wellnesspreneurs podcast is.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think it's for? It's a group of like-minded professionals within the holistic industry that come together, network, and help each other grow.
Right. And to be in the seat that we are in as facilitators of healing, we not only help other people with their healing, but we've done our own inner healing. We have to do our own inner healing in order to serve as facilitators in this field.
Absolutely.
So this podcast is intended to help guide you through your soul's evolution. We're taking the wellness coaching outside of the studio and on air for you here today.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. We want to start off with the fact that we all have a choice. We have a choice to evolve, to change, or to remain the same. That's where the title of this podcast came from, Evolve or Remain. You can remain the same, doing the same shit, the same mindset, continue having the same problems, being in that victim mentality, or you can step out of that and you can have the survival mentality. You can evolve your mindset, evolve and survive, and you can evolve and even thrive. It all starts with your words. You can change your words, change your mindset, and change your life. It can be scary when you start out. It's not easy.
It's downright ugly.
Right.
And messy and scary. And, if you told everybody what they would have to go through, they wouldn't do it. I think more people wouldn't do it. But the process of growth, the process of healing itself is a very messy, ugly thing.
It is messy, but when you go through the process, you work between the two states of darkness, which is the shadow,
mm-hmm. Yep.
and the light. And when you enter into the shadow, that's where the messiness is. But when you're there, you appreciate the light so much more.
You do. You're able to, and it takes a while to get to that point, by the way.
It does.
It takes a while because I think everybody looks at this or could look at this like it's a 30-day process or a 60-day process or whatever it is. And they're not going to realize that the process of healing is however long it takes you to get to that point. Sometimes you got to have it hammered into you over and over and over again before it clicks. And when it finally does click, you still need that time to process. I've talked a lot about processing emotions, and you need that time to process emotions after the change to integrate all that new information into your system. And it really is a step-by-step process, but there's no given time frame.
There is no given time frame, and when you start on the healing process, you're in it for your lifetime. So it's not It's not something that you're just going to go through for a year. No.
Ignorance is bliss, right? And I've said this a million times. If I could go back to before when this started, would I? I wouldn't. But looking back, ignorance is bliss, because to go through all of the pain, because it's all of those things from the past that you didn't deal with, right? So you have to bring them back up to the surface now. You got to go through them, quote unquote, a second time in your life so that you can feel it to heal it.
And as I coach people, I tell them, we're an onion.
Peel back the layers, baby.
Peel back the layers. Each trauma that you have has a layer to it. And you're not just going to revisit it once, because you're going to keep processing it. There's different layers that you're going to dive into, and they are presented to you when you're ready. And that is the key thing with healing your soul, is that you enter into this place when you align with it, when you are ready to get there.
Mm-hmm. So true. Yeah. I've met so many people that are they're not there yet. And that's okay, because in their own time, in their own space, in their own way. And you got to have compassion and empathy for people that are in that space. They can't be forced. I know there was a time in my growth and I was like, why can't they just figure this out? Why can't they do what I'm doing? Truth is because they can. They're just not ready to yet. And that's quite all right. So everyone is allowed that time frame to work through whatever it is in their own time.
Exactly. And when we are starting into this insightful path for ourselves, it's important to stay in our own lanes and not compare to anybody else. Yeah. Because our paths are different than everybody else's. Yeah. So we're going to see things, we're going to perceive things differently than everybody else in our lives. You will never perceive the same thing the same way as anybody else. No,
you will not. Everyone's got their own perspective on everything. And that's why, sometimes I'll look at people and I'm like, I wish I could just take a moment just to see things the way they do, especially with clients that I work with. How amazing would that be just to see it through their eyes for a split second and go, oh, I get it now. This is what's going on in their brain. It takes us so much time to discern what's going on even in our own selves to be able to help somebody else.
It's so true. And in this process, compassion goes a long way for self and others, because we don't know everything. No. Other people don't know. And that is a stepping stone when you start to step into the knowing of what's happening, what's happened in your life.
Breaking it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people just don't know better.
That's really important that you said that, because I think a lot of us will look back at our journey and where does it always stem from? Our childhood. So we can get really stuck in a place where we're like, well, we were brought up this way. Well, hold up a second. Have some grace for the people that came before you that you learned from. Have some compassion and empathy, because guess what? They're teaching you in the exact same way that they were taught. So now that we're older, the blame falls nowhere but us. We can't blame anybody before us. You can sit there, you can be upset, you can put that blame, but what's it going to do for you? Nothing.
It keeps you in that victim mentality, is what it does.
Absolutely.
Instead of seeing it for what it was, shedding forgiveness on whoever was involved, having compassion and understanding for the situations that you went through. So as you get older, you get to see from a different perspective than when you were in it.
Yeah. You get more information. You know better, like you said. And you can look at the people before you, parents, aunts, uncles, family, whatever it is, whomever brought you up, And in that moment, you can have compassion for those people because you realize like, oh, well, imagine what their childhood was like.
Exactly. Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to do, especially when you're going through your own stuff, is to take a moment, take a step back and realize we've all been through something. No one's coming out of this life unscathed. No one's coming out of this life without some sort of wound that they've had inflicted upon them. Okay, you've had it inflicted upon you. Great. Well, what do you do with it now?
Right.
If you know better, deal with it.
Exactly. So, Mike, what was a big pivotal point for you that got you into your healing?
Big pivotal point that got me into my healing. My healing came in stages, right? So I'm not going to go into the whole thing today, but I would say that I've been on this journey for a good 15 years. Energy work, things like that. Energy work being done on me, but not really delving too deeply into it, right? I would say about 4.5 years ago was a massive turning point in my full healing mode, where I got to see that true inner working, my internal belief system, my inner self, and how it worked, and where all my decisions came from, where all my behaviors came from. And it was truly from a breakup with an ex. And it was a relationship. I've learned a lot through relationships in my life. That's kind of where I get my experience, my knowledge, right? It's through the relationships that I've had with friends or intimate partners or whatever it may be. I get a lot of information, a lot of knowledge from that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I look back and I'm like, why did I have to go through all that stuff? I understand now why, but it was painful back then. But that big turning moment was coming out of that relationship, pretty traumatic breakup, and ending up in a place where for those couple of months afterwards, 2-3 months afterwards, I feel like I was in a very dark place by myself, really doing a lot of self-reflection. And I was doing a ton of journaling over a couple of months. And all of a sudden I was sitting in the kitchen and I'm sitting at the table and I can't remember what. I would have to go back to my journals and see exactly what I wrote that particular day. But in a blink of an eye, I met my inner child. I'd never done any inner child work. I'd never done any shadow work. That's not what I worked on at that point. I was pretty much a newbie to that stuff, but it was as if the universe was like, nah, I'm going to throw them into your line of sight. You're going to look at them. And in that moment, I realized, oh my God, it's my kid self that was screaming out for attention all of these years. It was my kid self looking for approval, looking for validation, that I was enough. And it stemmed from an old software program that I had installed in my brain, that I wasn't enough, I wasn't good enough, all of these things, everything from childhood, teenage years on up, right? And it just got stuck in there and it kept replaying itself over and over. So the reason why I saw that inner child was because I asked a couple of questions. One was, why is it that I keep choosing the same partners just in a different body?
Because you had a lesson to learn.
Yeah, a big one.
Yes.
A massive one. The next question that followed up was, and this was just me, I guess, channeling or spitballing or whatever was going on that day. And I was like, well, what's the common denominator in all this? And I was like, shit.
Yep.
I'm the common denominator in all my relationships.
Surprise.
In that moment, everything inside of me dropped. Seeing my inner child in that blink of an eye, I was literally left to tears sitting at the kitchen table, bawling my eyes out. And I was being told, tell that little boy inside you that I'm sorry. You need to apologize to that little boy right now for not seeing him, for not giving him the attention that he needed, for not validating his feelings, for pushing him aside all those years, and basically it was my kid self acting out in every one of my situations that I was encountering in life. So you want to talk a massive pivotal point in my life where I realized, wow. And now that's when I say like ignorance is bliss, because in that moment I was left with, well, what do I do now?
Yes.
And I only had one place to go to. It was forward. It's like, okay, I didn't know what that looked like. I had no clue. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then it was just kind of like an evolution of like mentors and people that I reached out to and said, okay, you know, here's what happened. Oh, okay. Well, I think, you know, this would be good for you. Maybe going through this program online, maybe doing this type of work, maybe doing some, which I do a lot of with clients now, shamanic journeying, you know, some healing energy work, things like that. Massive. So that was a huge pivotal moment in my life that started the real deep down dirty process of healing. And you fast forward almost 5 years and today, like I look back at me 5 years ago, it's almost like I look at myself as like a memory. Like I don't even know that person. I know him as a memory. But today I look at it, I'm like, wow, I feel completely different than before. And people are like, well, that's because you grow. Yeah, but this is some serious growth. You know, this is some serious tackling of like what they would call demons, inner demons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was huge for me.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like our listeners can take a lot from what you just shared. And I kind of want to go back into the journaling piece of it.
Okay.
Right? So starting more simple for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to get people to start journaling because they make a mountain.
They do.
Out of something that really doesn't need to be as big as our mind makes it.
Yeah. So when I hit the journaling piece of things, I felt like at that point that was the only way to get things out of my system. I had all these thoughts about the relationship that I was in that moment. And it sparked other thoughts about previous relationships prior to that. So for me, it was that process of like, okay, well, let me write down all of the instances that were, call them quote unquote, struggling or challenging situations, because I don't want to call them crazy or insane, you know, in the relationship. There were struggling and challenges that came up in that relationship and previous relationships, and I wanted to make sense of it. Okay, let's jot down this moment or memory.
And was it list format?
It was list format, but it was like once I opened the floodgates to a few memories that started coming up and kind of the process and what happened to me during that relationship. And we'll get into that later on in other episodes. But what happened to me during that relationship, I needed to make sense of it. I needed to break down the situations that occurred. And as I continued to do that, it was as if I opened the floodgates. And I think I have somewhere over 125 pages of actual like word style journals, you know, tons and tons of information. And finally, that was part of the reason why I got to those questions and made sense of it. Yeah, it took me a couple of months to get to that point. I think it was more like a little over a month. And then I spent the next month or two making sense of it all, you know?
Allowing it to integrate.
Yeah.
Giving it that time and
give
space.
It that time and that space. Because if you don't, you're just going to blackslide. Because then you're not going to understand why you went through everything you did. You got to make sense of it. And
backsliding when you're in your healing does occur.
Oh, yeah. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Exactly.
It's a real thing.
Right. And I've learned that through my relationships too. Mm-hmm. As you said, dating the same energy.
Yeah.
Just a different form.
Yeah.
My thing is narcissists. I'm very familiar with narcissism.
I didn't go there, but those were a lot of my relationships that I was in, and it was due to the fact that like I was attracting those people because I wanted to feel enough. And we all know that those people are takers. And I'll keep giving as long as you keep validating.
I agree.
Right?
I was in that same headspace as well. I also feel like from my traumas and my experiences, I had some narcissistic tendencies within myself that I can look upon now and shed light upon and know that that is a memory. That is something that I have worked on shedding. And that's a big question out in the community, too, is if narcissism can change.
I love it. We're going there. But I almost feel like we need to back up a little bit.
Okay.
Right? Honestly, because I'm sure the listeners and everybody we're talking to and people out there that know us want to know a little bit about you. What was your pivotal moment? What was that turning point in your life that got you started on this healing road?
So I say that my healing started 10 years ago when I started doing the work. I left automotive business, family business, and my dad passed away and gave me the permission to start on my own path.
Okay.
So when he passed away, it felt like the chains were lifted. But really, when I started doing deep dives was during COVID.
Okay. I feel like COVID it changed the world. We all know that, for the worse and for the better, you know?
Definitely. And during COVID, I kept saying, we're on a train right now. We can choose a path. We either dive into our substance abuse more and more, or we choose the path of healing and go in that direction.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to do both, and it wasn't working out.
Nope.
So the substance abuse, I ended up having to face head on, and am dealing with that now that I've been sober over a year from alcohol.
Congratulations.
Thank you. California sober. That is a thing. I am.
What is that? What is I don't think I've heard that statement before.
California sober is when you don't drink alcohol, but you do practice cannabis and mushrooms.
Okay. Sounds like a blast.
Oh, yes.
I love it.
Right.
I'm in.
So I feel like the mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms, have helped me a lot in my healing journey.
Yeah, and I think getting somebody on this show will be pretty awesome that specializes in that stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, give some more information to people.
For sure. But when I was during COVID, we weren't going out anywhere. That gave me time to really get into my yoga practice. And a lot of stuff started coming up. Stuff from sexual abuse when I was a kid, and trying to make sense of all of that and all the players involved in that, because there was a lot of players involved in that.
Was that something that you had already known that had happened, or something that came up through a memory for you?
I knew that it had happened, but I didn't know that that was the catalyst to my substance use.
Okay. So you made the connection.
I made the connection.
Right.
That wasn't the only catalyst, though. I call it the perfect storm.
Right.
Which I can get into in other episodes.
Sure.
But a lot of things happened that kicked off my substance abuse in my teens. But yeah, so COVID definitely propelled me forward into my healing.
Okay.
And my next level. And removing the alcohol, because I was only using it as a mask, really. It was an escape.
Try to solve a problem.
I was the problem.
Yeah. We take us with us everywhere we go.
Yes, we do.
Right? Yeah.
And I didn't want to face all of the things that I had gone through.
Right.
So removing that, I forced myself to acknowledge what had happened, why the substances took hold, and knowing now that I have the power within me to overcome any of those obstacles that I was presented. And it wasn't easy. It was very emotional. But knowing that I'm human.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a superhero as much as my clients might think I am. But knowing that I'm human and definitely feeling that forgiveness for everybody involved along the way and myself has helped me to get to where I am today.
Okay. Well, congratulations, because it's no easy task.
No,
to deal with that stuff, to make those connections, to make those realizations, to even just go back and think about that stuff that you've gone through.
Right. You know? And working with my inner child, right? So that's something that's come up recently. Not only do we have inner children within us, but we also have our inner teenager.
Yeah, we have all the inner whatevers
right.
at every stage that we've gone through, that we've had some sort of traumatic event occur. And I had done a session, somebody had done a session on me with tuning forks, biofield, and they were able to pick out the years that I had certain things go on with, and they would call it out, and I would have to think for a moment and be like, whoa, yeah, I had something really big happen in that particular year. Yes. Oh yeah. It's just amazing to see that. Yeah. It's not just the inner child, quote unquote, like of the 5 or 6 year old screaming for attention. It is the inner teen. It could be the preteen. It could be the later teen. You know, what happened during those years? And that's what it comes down to. That's who's screaming out. And those are the layers, right? Of the onion that you were talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you think, I've said this, I'm like, I thought I'd deal with something. And then all of a sudden it was like 6 months, a year later, 2 years later, whatever it is. And I'm like, I thought I dealt with that. Why is it coming back up?
Because there was another layer.
Exactly. There was a piece of it that was lingering out there.
Exactly. And playing off of the inner child, inner teenager, then look at your 20s. What happened in your 20s? You know, because around that age, becoming legal in the United States to start drinking.
Right.
What did that look like for you?
Yeah.
Did you dive into it?
Yep.
Did you not? Like, what was your direction? You know? And as you get older, reflecting back, okay, my 30s, what happened in that?
Yeah.
You know, so you can break down your life in those types of ways to do your healing. And it does help digest it.
Absolutely.
A bit more. And allow the changes to integrate within.
Absolutely. I think just to remind our listeners here and people watching, as you can tell, we're really getting into the deep stuff. We're getting into a place where most people don't want to go. They don't want to visit. And this is the stuff that we're going to be tackling on this podcast, on this show, is that stuff that you don't want to talk about. But we're going to offer solutions, options, resources as we move through this, because a lot of it, this has to do with your mental health, your well-being, your whole wellness. It has to do with all of it. And so we want to make sure that people are doing okay out there and can get better, because I think there's more and more people today that are looking for resources. They're looking for different ways, alternative ways of healing and going through their stuff and coming out the other side.
I feel like we're in a huge movement right now.
Massive.
A lot more people are waking up.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And wanting to be a better person, which is huge.
You brought up the narcissistic tendencies.
Yes.
Let's clear this up for everybody out there. We all got them. We all have narcissistic tendencies. I don't care who you are. To be able to survive in this 3D world, we have to have those narcissistic tendencies, because that allows us to communicate with each other in a certain way. Now, it's when and how we use those tendencies. We have to be aware of them and what's going on. Are they controlling us, or are we controlling them? That's really important. And you brought up that point of like, can a narcissist be healed? Oh, it's so good. Oh man, that could be its own show.
That could be its own episode.
Yeah. What's your thought on that?
In order for a narcissist to change, they have to acknowledge that they are a narcissist.
Okay.
Which is one of the hardest things for a narcissist to acknowledge.
Absolutely.
Because it's never them. It's everybody else.
Victim mentality.
Yes.
Right? But where does that come from? Narcissists are created.
It's a learned behavior, I think.
Yeah, it's a learned behavior through traumas that they've gone through in their life. One of two things, and this is just from the research that I've done, and, you know, as we move forward, we'll have experts on the show. But just from the research that I've done, narcissists are created from early childhood, and usually out of one of two things: massive amounts of trauma that puts them in victim mentality.
Protection mode.
Protection and survival mode. Security. They don't have it. Never did. Right? Or number two, full-on entitlement. Silver spoon in their mouth.
Handed everything.
Never had to work for anything. Never had to do for anything. So they feel entitled to everything around them. So they become the user and abuser per se. Can they be healed? Yes, I think they can. This is just my opinion. And I know it might piss a lot of people off because there's therapists out there that won't work with narcissists because they say that, no, they can't be healed. They've literally put a hard fist up to them, a hard hand up to them and said, no, it's not going to happen. They can't change. The truth of the matter is, with more research that's being done right now in psychotherapy and just therapists in general, they're realizing that a narcissist can come to acknowledge the fact that they are narcissistic, right? And realize why. If we realize that you and I, right, we've had deep trauma, we've had all these things that we've had to work through, I can look back and say that there were times in my life where I was narcissistic, and it was because of these type of traumas leading me to this behavior.
Right.
Now you start to heal. What happens when you heal? You start to heal your heart, your system, your brain. What do you do in those moments? You are literally creating compassion and empathy for yourself. And that pours out of you, and you have compassion and empathy for others. I'm making it sound easy.
No,
it is not.
It is not.
You know?
Because we're not just talking about behaviors, we're talking about nervous system involvement as well.
Absolutely.
And when you are a narcissist, that deep down fear, that fight or flight,
mm-hmm.
that is really the catalyst on the behavior
Agreed.
of narcissism. And to have somebody face it, that is fear as well. It's scary.
To face any of that stuff, any of the ugly stuff, any of the shadow stuff of yourself that you don't like. I just had a client 2 weeks ago. I gave her an assignment. I want you to go home. I want you to look yourself in the mirror. And I want you to sit there and ask the question, what is it that I don't like about myself? And I said, but you're going to sit there for a while after you ask that question. Because the first thing that happens with that question is the first response, well, no, I like myself. I love myself. I think I'm enough. I'm good. You're going to answer it that way because you don't want to see the other things. So I asked her to sit there in her stuff, her shit, for a long period of time and looking yourself in the mirror and just jot down what comes up. I don't care if it takes you 5, 10, 30 minutes. Sit there with yourself and feel.
That is a very hard activity for one to do that's not used to that. Mirroring is a very, very powerful technique to utilize in your healing. Not only just sitting there and reflecting on what you see,
right,
but being able to actually talk to yourself in the mirror and say positive affirmations to yourself. It's very uncomfortable, but I'll tell you, give yourself a few minutes and practice that. You can write down the affirmations before you go in front of the mirror with yourself. and then just read them off to make it easier,
Right.
allow it to flow. But the power in mirroring
Huge.
is so transformative.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you have to be willing to sit there with yourself, with the parts of yourself you don't like. You know, even mirroring can happen not just in a true mirror and looking at yourself, but mirroring also comes up with the partners and relationships that we have in our lives. They're a mirror to show us what it is that we either like or don't like about ourselves. And a lot of times, if your relationship is going south the wrong way, take a look at that relationship and take a look at that person and ask yourself what you don't like about that person. I'll guarantee it's probably the same thing within you. And that's a hard realization to make.
It is a very hard realization to make. And that also brings up the relationships that we allow in our life.
Right.
Right? So as you start on the healing journey, you're going to really start tuning in to those that are closest to you.
Yep.
And what's the saying? The 5 closest people to you?
That's your life. Take a look at the 5 closest people to you and you will realize that's the life you're living. So if the 5 closest people to you are people you don't really admire or like or really want to be around so much, but for some reason they're friends of yours and you're just, that's it. Well, there you go. That's the life you're living. They're your mirror.
Exactly. And a good way to find out if those people no longer align with you is when you're in their presence, are you anxious?
Mm-hmm.
Do you enter into fight or flight mode?
Right.
Do you go into that negative mindset? Then if you are on your healing journey and you want to go in that direction for yourself, you need to start creating boundaries.
Yeah.
Better boundaries with those people. And if they're too deep into their own shit,
Yeah.
then it might be time to walk away from that relationship or create even stronger boundaries.
Agreed.
Whatever you can do. Sometimes we can't walk away from those relationships.
No, and that's where I think we maybe have to spend a little bit more time analyzing the triggers that come up, right? So, okay, they're triggering me. I can't hang with them anymore. Okay, you can go down that road, and you can say that, and you can create boundaries. But then the truth of it is, why are they triggering you?
Exactly.
And can you resolve your trigger? Can you dig deep within yourself, realize why they're triggering you, resolve it, and then still find a way to be around them if you have to, if it's a relationship that you can't break, and they're no longer triggering you. It's remaining calm in the storm type of thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Creating that shield, that aura,
Exactly.
to not allow that energy within,
Yeah.
and to keep them at arm's length.
Yeah.
Try not to absorb.
Right? We're going through a lot of stuff today. I I think you and I said that we weren't going to get into the whole thing today, but it kind of led down that path, didn't it?
It did. And I think that it flowed really well today.
Yeah.
There's no way that you and I can't go into these rabbit holes because there's so much to be said and so much to help people with.
Yeah, I think we wanted to give people an idea of where this show was going to go, and the topics that we're going to delve into, and they just saw it. Narcissism, trauma, triggers, healing, messy, ugly, alcoholism, addiction, and that's stuff that we, you brought it up within yourself. And I spent many years using different types of addictions to run away from my problems, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, food, which is a huge one for me because now, and for the last 15 years, I've been a nutrition coach. So even through that early process, I feel like there were still a lot of things with food that I was tackling in myself. Just because we're teaching doesn't mean that we're not still going through and we're the student.
Exactly.
Right? So, so many different types of addictions that we trade one for another if we don't deal with our shit.
Well, there is a science behind that as well,
Yeah.
right? And hormones, the hormones
Huge.
involved,
Yeah.
the dopamine releases, the crashes, you know what I mean? And why we keep seeking, even with alcohol, I think it's a 15-minute dopamine release, but it's a surge.
It's a surge. So the longer we abuse a substance, the more consistent our dopamine hit is, and the more we're looking for that higher dopamine hit, right? So people are always like, well, how come we can't make it easy to get off of drugs or alcohol at that point? Well, it's because our natural dopamine will never hit the levels of an external dopamine kick. It will never get that high. So then what we have to do is spend less time, which this is hard, spend less time in those addictions and creating new habits and rituals. And I don't want to use the word addictions here because we're not trying to create addictions. We're trying to create healthy habits and rituals for ourselves. And to do that, we have to create new neural pathways in our brain.
Neuroplasticity.
You got it. We're going to talk about that stuff too, because
Yes,
that's
we will.
fascinating, because I've seen the studies where scientists have come straight out, doctors come straight out and said, because our brain is plastic and it can be molded and pliable, guess what can happen? Well, that happens sometimes, right? But we got technical stuff going on in the background over here, but that's all right. So because our brain is plastic and we can mold it and shape it and create new neural pathways, then they've literally said this. You can cure your addictions. You can get rid of them. I feel like I've done that. I used to have that taste for alcohol, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I used to get that. I used to get that feeling in that like, like, oh, it's time. Your body will let you know. Maybe there was a stressful situation that came up. Maybe there was a trigger that happened or whatever it was, right? And it would trigger you to feel like, oh, I need that. I can taste it before I can even get my hands on it. I no longer have that taste in my mouth because I've spent more time creating new habits and new rituals and did some really radical, deep healing shit in the last 12 months that it's as if new neural pathways were created and those old ones, they're there, but the new ones supersede them now.
Yeah.
I don't even taste the alcohol. I have no urge, no cravings, no nothing. I can't say that I haven't had a drink, but it's strange enough that I have that drink and I sit there and go, oh, I don't want this. It's poison for my system. Last time I had a drink, I think was, around the holidays, around Christmas, and it was a bourbon or something like that. And I thought it was like going to taste good and I'd have one to be, fine, whatever. I was like, I don't even want to be drinking this right now. Completely different. It was an opposite effect because as soon as that liquor would hit my lips, my tongue, I was like, yeah, it's on.
And everybody's addictions are different. Yes. I do want to touch upon that.
Yes.
I cannot have alcohol. I was a blackout drinker. Okay. I don't align as an alcoholic because I don't like to put myself in that mental space and put myself in that box. But
Same.
I choose not to have alcohol in my life for reasons that I'm sure will come up in other episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll get down and dirty with it.
Definitely. So we do want to head towards the end of this episode.
Yes, we do.
We want to leave you with something simple today. So we started the podcast off with talking about how we can change our mindset by using different words. Words I like to eliminate: try. Get try out of your vocabulary. And the shoulds.
I'm going to try to go to the gym. No, you're going to go to the gym.
You're either going to do it or you're not. And stop saying I can't. If you can't do something, instead of saying that, say, how do I learn?
We just talked about the neural pathways.
Right. That's how you can reprogram.
Yeah. Every time you say I can't or I'll try or whatever it is, you're just continuously wiring your brain to reinforce that mentality. So create new neural pathways and say what you're saying. New words.
Right. New words. I don't know. Well, fuck around and find out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's too hard. I'm not going to do that. That's very limiting as well.
Right.
That's a challenge, and I'm going to figure out how to get past that challenge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So just start thinking about the words that you use, how you can rephrase, and that is one of the first solid steps that you can take in rewiring yourself and your nervous system. We want to let you know about what's coming up in other episodes.
Yes.
So we've kind of touched upon some of those topics today.
Absolutely.
We will be having guest speakers on.
Yes, everything and anything. And we're going to be talking to, local business owners, potential clients that we've worked with, people who have gone through their stuff, are on the healing journey, can offer solutions, options, resources, for anybody and anybody out there that needs help, that's seeking an alternative way, that's seeking just help in general. Right.
And just to leave the listeners with another podcast that they might be able to listen to. Mm-hmm. What's your top?
What's my top?
What's your top podcast that you listen to?
What's my top? Oh, wow. There's a few, but the one that stands out to me the most is Ed Milet. You know who Ed Milet is?
I have no idea.
No idea. Okay. You should definitely listen to him. He started on his own podcast some years back. He's on Sirius now with his podcast. He is just a great interviewer, great speaker, has gone through his own battles, gone through his battles where he saw his dad going through alcoholism. He's been able to overcome so many struggles and challenges in his life and build an empire, a business, worth over $250 million, and continues to invest in other businesses and keep running his businesses. And, he's up there with the likes of Tony Robbins for me, Dean Graziosi, who you're probably familiar with. It looks like it kind of just shook your head a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. John Maxwell. I have so many to list off, but Ed sticks out to me because he's got I vibe on his vibe. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool personality.
Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
And Jay Shetty and Rob Dial as well.
Okay.
Those are my top two.
Love the Jay Shetty podcast.
For sure. Yep. All right.
Okay. Well, that's it.
That is it for our first episode.
Yeah. So we will be back with you. We're going to be doing this, I think we decided, once a month?
Once a month for now.
Okay. And then we're probably going to pick up the pace because I think we're going to get into a good rhythm, So we'll be back in about a month, but you guys will get so much more information in between. So
thank you for listening.
Thank you.